Welcome back to Society Case Files. My name is Robert, and today I'm going to review the Fantastic Four First Steps. If you like this kind of content and you want to see more, please subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. Otherwise, we're going to dive right in. I went and saw the Fantastic Four in the theater finally. I pretty much waited for the first weekend because it was just crazy how many seats had been sold. It was very hard to get in. So I was able to get into a 3D show where there was like literally only 3 other people. And it was a nice experience in the theater for the most part. The guys that were there were kind of shouting at the beginning. At some point, they calmed down, thankfully. But I would like to start by saying that this review is not entirely positive. And I want to make it clear that just because I'm going to be kind of critical doesn't mean that I am crapping on the taste of anyone who loved this movie. If you did love it, that's great. That's awesome. There are plenty of films that I personally am completely in love with that are reviled by critics, even by other people. So I get it. And I'm going to be critical, but I hesitate to use terms like this is a terrible movie, this was a bad movie, because that's just not true. It's hard for a $200 million movie to literally be terrible or bad. What I can say is that Fantastic Four did not work for me. And it didn't work on a number of levels. And I'd like to talk about that. Before we get into the specific reviews of the movie, though, I did just see an article, as of the recording of this, that it had a pretty steep drop between week 1 sales and week 2. It's a 66% drop. It's right up there with some of their other movies that Marvel's been putting out. And I'm not entirely sure why. I mean, it has good reviews. It had good audience reviews. And I think that overall, most people seemed to at least partially enjoy it. Though I have seen some comments that are on the higher end of a review scale, but are still kind of harsh in the sense of things like, it looks great, but that's just about it. Or, stuff just along those lines. It's not like super negative, but not glowing either. For me, the Fantastic Four just felt cold. And it is a sister movie to Superman in a lot of ways. Because in Superman, James Gunn decided to start the movie off with Superman very well established. Like, everybody knew who he was. He'd already done a whole bunch of stuff. He beat up monsters and he's done things all over the place. And the same thing can be said of Fantastic Four. The previews should make it fairly clear that they are well established in the timeline. The movie opens and it says that it's Earth, whatever. I think it was 818, but I can't remember the specific number. So obviously not the one that we've been dealing with in the Avengers universe thus far. So here we are, a little bit of multiverse action, of course, because they're still using that. And you could tell right off the bat because the aesthetic of the show is all sort of this retro sci-fi 60s, like the Jetsons or something. And it makes sense that the director would be good at this and have that look down. WandaVision, he directed all 9 of those. Now, where does the cold stuff come in? I guess that for me, it's mostly the fact that even though we're supposed to kind of know who the Fantastic Four is by the time we start watching the movie, there is a sense of rushing. Like the whole first, 30 minutes just felt super chaotic and just too rushed. I think the movie could have afforded being just an extra half an hour longer to just establish a few more things, to not gloss over so much. I don't mind getting caught up quickly, but this was a little too much in that regard. And then once the movie actually starts going, there are several things that just sort of make you scratch your head that just, I don't know. Like I said, it just left me cold. So as I watched it, I'm like, wow, what is the emotional part of this? Where am I supposed to really start to feel for what's going on here? And because we've never seen them before, this version of the Fantastic Four, that is, and they're not making a sequel to the ones that came out in the 2000s with Chris Evans and Ioan Gruffudd and Jessica Alba and Michael Chiklis. So since it's not building on what that built, and since it's not building on what those started, And we are effectively having a fresh start with this team. There's a lot of stuff that's very hard to get invested in because we don't really know them the way that they're being portrayed. And they are different. They are considerably different than those characters that we've seen as we've seen them before. Well, I mean, let's be fair. The Thing isn't really all that different, but Johnny is. He's kind of a hothead, but he's also fairly smart in this, and he comes up with some things that you wouldn't necessarily have assumed based on your previous knowledge. I should also be fair. I haven't seen the random Fantastic Four movie that came out. I can't even remember when, but it was before the Marvel folks got back hold of it. I guess it was another Fox one. Probably as ill-fated as, say, the Dark Phoenix movie, where it just should have done something different. I don't know. I don't know that much about that one. So if you were coming at this with knowledge from that, I suspect, and please correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but I suspect you'd be kind of confused as to what was going on as far as like the characters being dramatically different. First off, the guy who plays Reed in that older one looked considerably younger than Pedro does as the role, which is fine. I mean, the idea here is that these characters are effectively seasoned veteran heroes. They've been saving the Earth for quite a while. What's interesting is that this is set in New York, and the retro sci-fi thing aside, it feels more alien than Metropolis did in Superman to me. And I think that's part of the coldness. I think it's part of the fact that we didn't get enough of that world built for us before we were thrown into it. So there isn't quite as much adoption. We don't feel as much for it because we haven't experienced it long enough. And it's different enough from the time period we live in to feel detached. At least that's how I experienced it. Now, I'm going to go into some spoilers in a minute. So I'm going to take just a step back from specifics and sort of talk about what I found when I did a little bit of research. I went and looked up the movie. It had quite a few writers, and I think that's always kind of a mistake. When you see that the screenplay has undergone multiple rewrites or has loads of people involved, whether it's 4 to 6 people on a story or 4 to 6 people on the screenplay. If you think back to the Tom Cruise Mummy, that had quite a few people too. And the tone ends up suffering from that because for whatever reason, the final script that's used ends up having chunks from all of the previous versions. And that's dangerous. It does lead you to have an issue where you're not entirely sure how you're supposed to feel through different scenes. I think this probably does suffer from that a little bit. There's some stuff that just doesn't make a whole lot of sense that you have to infer. And, you know, sometimes that's okay. But in the case of things where it's going to lead to continuity, it'd be nice if you didn't have to just fill in gaps on your own. As far as the technical side goes, many of the effects were pretty good. But the Silver Surfer was hit or miss. There are some times that the Silver Surfer looked great, and sometimes that you were like, isn't that like stock? Isn't that like what you were using for like the editing? And isn't it supposed to have been smoothed out or something? Because it really did start to feel like video game motion where the character goes, you know, and doesn't move the eyes until the last minute. And even when they do, the eyes move unnaturally. I saw that a few times, and it was a little strange. I mean, this is a $200 million movie, and they let that get through. I don't really see why there would have been a huge rush. We're not getting another Marvel movie until Avengers, from what I understand. So they had time. They could have pushed this out to August if they needed a little bit more time to cook it, and that probably would have been a good idea, to be honest. I think this could have done a lot better as far as the cold, emotionless thing that I felt if we would have had, number one, more time to develop the characters in the world, and number two, a little more time to smooth out the effects and ensure that they look good. So we're going to get into spoilers here in just a moment. I will timestamp the spoiler from the beginning until the very end of the spoilers so you can get back into the rest of the video. So if you haven't seen it yet and you care about spoilers, then you can skip this whole part. But if you don't care and you just want to hear me talk about what I struggled with in the movie, then plow ahead. So, spoilers starting now. All right, so probably the craziest stuff about this movie came down to some of the plot points. So we've got Galactus coming. You've seen that in the trailer. And Galactus is the devourer of worlds. He's going to basically destroy this Earth. The Herald arrives, tells everybody they're done. And the Fantastic Four, of course, are not going to stand for that. And they decide to do something. So instead of waiting for it to come here, they decide to travel there and negotiate, which is cool. And when they arrive, they basically are welcomed in to have a conversation. Now, taking one step back, in case you don't know, I think this was in the trailer as well. Sue Richards is pregnant, and they've been trying. Of course, they're very concerned because of what happened to them in space. They're concerned about the child having some kind of powers or being, having issues of whatever sort. But all evidence suggests that the baby is totally fine. Well, she's really far along when they go out to meet up with Galactus. Far enough along that she has to give birth during the flight back. Now, whether that's because it was induced due to stress or it was just that close, I'm not entirely sure. But it did seem a little irresponsible to go to meet this doom, this thing that's going to consume the entire world while being that pregnant. Of course, they get there and Galactus is like, hey, you guys can come in, we'll talk, and I will spare your world, but I want your child. Of course, they turn him down, and it leads to a brief action scene. They escape. Barely, because the Silver Surfer is ridiculous and capable of traveling at the speed of light and doing all kinds of crazy stuff. But they do eventually escape and give birth to the child, go home, and then immediately let everybody know, we could have given them our child and they would have spared this planet, but we clearly said no, and we're going to find another way. And the people of Earth, of course, of this Earth are just maniacs. And they're like, how could you do that? And on one hand, yeah, absolutely. It's like if they would have sacrificed their child and their planet would have been saved, that'd been great. But it seems to me that they've dealt with enough supervillains to know that there's a chance that it would have been like, thanks for the kid, and still killed them all. I don't know. I guess that considering that in this world, the Fantastic Four are so prominent as part of their society, they're like negotiating peace deals. They've got a cartoon. They're teaching their children. They're well known. I would have thought that these people would have been like, wow, so what's the next plan? They didn't really go there. They were just like, why didn't you do that? So, of course, they do come up with a plan. And throughout this time, Johnny is actually working on figuring out this language that the Silver Surfer uses. They've got some records for that. I am being very broad, of course, because I'm trying to get to a point. The overall plan is to move Earth. Now, while I thought that was really fun in Doctor Who when it happened, it's insane. The idea is total madness. I mean, Reed Richards is the smartest man alive, apparently. That's one of his things. But I think it was like, I swear that he used a statistic that it was like the teleportation would get them to within 2% of the area that they needed to be to keep the world safe. Now, I mean, I'm under the impression, and correct me if I'm wrong if you know better than me, but unless it was exact, wouldn't the planet just be like torn to pieces? I mean, yes, it's a fantasy. It's a superhero movie. People are like stretching impossibly long. A dude turns into fire. One guy's made of rock. Yes, suspension of disbelief is one thing. But teleporting the whole planet just does not seem like the solution here. And they spend a significant amount of time with the characters going around and building these bridges all over the planet. It's an unprecedented moment of solidarity among the entirety of the human race. And they get the things made, and they're about ready to make it happen. Galactus is there, and the Silver Surfer screws it up, just starts blowing up the bridges. Well, thank God, because quite frankly, I'm pretty sure that this act of desperation was going to kill everybody anyway. But the whole notion that that was the solution just seems, I don't know. I struggled with it. So aside from feeling cold about the world and the activities, this concept of how they were going to solve the problem, had it worked, it just seems like committing suicide on your own terms as opposed to letting the devourer take out your planet. But anyway, obviously that doesn't happen. So then Galactus comes. There's a pretty big battle, but I'm going to tell you something. As far as destruction is concerned, Spider-Man gets up to worse action than the kaiju Galactus. I mean, Galactus himself stomps through the street looking for the kid, and he finds him twice, but they fairly easily get him into the final bridge and get rid of him. So, again, at the end of the movie, you're sort of like, well, that wasn't really that bad. You know, you guys wasted some of the planet's most impossible to find resources for a cockamamie plan to teleport the planet, when really all you had to do was lure him with the kid and teleport him to parts unknown. I mean, the solution was so simple that it seemed like we were killing time. And this is where I think multiple writers kind of screwed things up. I feel like somebody who would have had a better grasp of the characters, maybe someone who was more versed in the success of some of the other movies, would have done a better job of finding some interim solution between the we have a problem and we're not giving up the kid and then the end result. It just, I don't know. And then, of course, everyone's like, yeah, you won. We don't think you're scum for not giving up your kid now. All around, I don't know. I think that the story itself kind of suffered from that regard, that it was just so ridiculously easy to ultimately beat him. You know, he caused a little bit of trouble. There was a tiny bit of peril. But in a lot of ways, it didn't really seem like the Fantastic Four were really pushed too far. Yeah, there's a slightly dangerous moment when Sue exerts herself too much and basically dies. But who in that theater didn't think that her child was going to have the power cosmic and save her? I mean, it just seemed obvious to me. Maybe I'm just cynical. Maybe I've seen too much. It's possible. But for me, I feel like those things really did kind of make it harder to enjoy the end result. It wasn't a satisfying ending. Let's put it that way. I don't really feel like they were taxed. And this is like the monster, the beast that is like the scariest thing ever. It's devoured many worlds before coming here. And ultimately, they kind of rounded him up in like, not even like an hour. I don't even think it took an hour to beat him in movie time. And then one final thing about spoilers that really kind of made me scratch my head. For some reason, Johnny was really keen to sacrifice his own life. I didn't really get any evidence that suggested that he had something to atone for or that he should have wanted that. He was just like trying it. I think he tries at least twice. But I mean, it's like, why? Dude, just trust your teammates. They've come through every other time. It was just interesting that they made that distinction, because when they try to take the baby, Johnny is like, hey, instead of taking the baby, take me. It's like, well, I mean, that's noble and all, but maybe take a breath, bro. Let some people think. Let's have the conversation go on a little longer. And then at the end, when Galactus looks like he might escape the bridge, he tries to sacrifice himself again. But all around, I don't know. I can't say that Fantastic Four was terrible. It was not like the worst thing ever. And as far as Marvel movies go, there are actually worse movies. You know, movies that made less sense, movies that didn't develop their characters at all, like The Eternals. I don't think The Eternals had enough time, and it should have been a TV show, especially with that many characters spanning that much time. It was ridiculous to put it into a movie form. And the fact that anyone was surprised that it didn't do very well was kind of crazy. Just because by that time, Marvel had learned the discipline to introduce a character, to give them some time, to develop them in their own film, and then move them into a team format. Bringing out all of the Eternals at the exact same time Now, granted, it would have been harder to individualize them, but bringing them all together like that in a single film just didn't give them enough time for us to care about any individual character. In fact, I've seen the movie twice, once in the theater and once at home, and I can't remember a single character name, which is crazy. You know, that's why they shouldn't have had, like, however many it was. I think it was 8 people in that team just for one film. It's nuts. Fantastic Four kind of suffers the same thing. It's just too short of a film, and there's too much crammed in, too much chaos at the beginning, and then a lackluster Act 2 and an Act 3 that just doesn't have the sort of peril that you expect from a creature that effectively can devour planets and has done so many, many, many times. So anyway, that's my impression of Fantastic Four. That's where I walked away from it. I think that aesthetically it was great. I wasn't completely enthralled with the casting choices. I think that they didn't have enough time to really embody those characters either. It's just sometimes being thrown into the middle of a story is the best way to tell the story. And sometimes you suffer because the characters themselves are not given the spotlights they require in order for us to care about them as much as we need to get through the acts and find a satisfactory conclusion. That is what the Fantastic Four primarily suffered from. We just didn't have enough time to care about these people. And considering that it does not bank on any of the previous attempts, which we had 3, and more if you want to talk about the cartoon and all that stuff, that's not enough to push us over the finish line to really jump on their side. So I suspect that uber fans of the Fantastic Four who have read all the comics and are just looking at this as a live action interpretation and don't need any other background to really dive into them, they probably had a great time. For the rest of us who are like passing fans, you know, I've read a couple comics when I was a kid, seen the movies, liked them for the most part. I think this was not really enough to bring us over to the side to think that this was great. But anyway, have you seen the Fantastic Four? Did you love it? Did you not love it? Did you just feel it sort of lackluster? I'd love to hear your comments and thoughts. Let me know. I am not married to this opinion. I suspect that if I watch it again, I might like it more. And I probably will. When it comes to the home market, I'll give it a second try and see how I feel. But at least for now, I just wanted it to be better. It's probably in the lower 5 Marvel movies for me. Down there with Thor, The Dark World, and The Eternals. That's it for me. Thanks for stopping by today. This is Robert with Society Case Files, signing off.